Sounds of Gotham. Here's our crew.
Hey, I'm Garrett Jane.
Hey, I'm Daniel White. I'm a Batman gadget expert. Excited to talk here.
I'm Chloe Lackey, and I know way too much about Batman.
And I'm Devin Redmond.
And today we're going to be talking about Batman, obviously, but specifically throughout time, the media, as well as different forms and genres that Batman has been presented in, have largely impacted the Batman mythos. So we want to focus on that and how Batman has never really stayed static, but he's always changing, and because of these different genres and forms and media styles that he's been presented in.
Yeah.
So first we're going to talk a little bit about the genre of Batman. He's, I'm sure everyone has a slightly different idea of how he's presented, but throughout time, throughout the decades, it's always been changing. He's had a lot of different faces, so to say. As we've talked about, one of the main reasons that Batman has been so, or as we're going to talk about, one of the main reasons Batman has been so consistently popular is because he has a slightly inconsistent genre. Batman has worn many different faces throughout his time, and most likely will continue to wear more. Though it's always the same Batman, he's appeared in many different lights, which has kept him interesting and new, and people and fans don't know what to expect next. So for that reason, he remains a popular interest.
Yeah, absolutely. In the past, I know that Batman used to be more of a detective and mystery genre in the first comics, and then it shifted to more of an action and fighting genre in later comics and films. So Batman first appeared in the DC comic series Detective Comics, in particular Detective Comics number 27, published in 1939. Batman was a mystery-solving hero and used violence and even killed people when necessary, which is completely different from today's Batman, who has a rule of never killing anyone.
It's really weird if you read the first comic, because he just kills multiple people within the first issue. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It's just funny because in the recent Nolan films, to make a point, they always bring up how he never kills anyone, and even in The Dark Knight, the Joker taunts him with his moral code of never wanting to kill anybody.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so moving to the 1960s. We know that Batman dabbled in some science fiction, their genre. So characters like Mr. Freeze and events that surrounding him were more science fiction-y rather than detective.
Yeah.
So now moving to the live-action Batman TV series that ran from 1966 to 68, and its spin-off of the movie in 66 drastically differed in genre from the Batman we have seen so far. The TV show was more of a comical and funny and silly genre, and the episodes were filled with playful villains and lighthearted crime and fighting.
Right, and then in the 70s, Batman returned to a darker state. Creators were trying to move from the lighthearted, laughable portrayal of Batman in the 60s and then return to the darkness. This return to darkness was not only evident in Batman himself, but also in his villains. The Joker was present and mischievous trickster in the 60s, returned to his roots as a homicidal maniac.
Though, Daniel, you did some research on the different ages. Is it still in the Silver Age, technically, or is it the Bronze Age at this point?
I think the 70s was considered during the Silver Age.
So we still, I think, have a sillier atmosphere, sillier plot points, but they wanted to definitely return, I think, to a more dark.
This is the shifting
Batman.
point. So it's like the characters are becoming more dark, but the storylines aren't as heavy.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And then in the 80s, for sure, it definitely became much more darker when the Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One was published by Frank Miller. He definitely took Batman to a more dark, tragic superhero and took him to the next level. Yeah, and then ironically, when we get to this darker, tragic action fighting of Batman, he no longer kills his villains. The darker Batman genre was furthered even more in Tim Burton's films in 1989, where Batman entered into the Gothic genre.
And they maintained that genre pretty much throughout the 90s. You had a lot of series that continued this thematic with the Bruce Timm shows of Batman the Animated Series, and even into the later 90s, the Batman Beyond television show, which kept that darker theme, but also, because it was targeted for families, he kept the no-kill policy that they had developed in the late 80s. And today, while some of Batman's detective-like qualities have stayed with him, his character has transitioned into more of an action genre, as we can see in films like Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. where he does a lot of fighting, cool choreography, action scenes, but less of the detective that we may have seen in earlier incarnations.
I know, Chloe, you just mentioned that Batman has shifted from more of to a family setting.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to switch over and talk about how the media has impacted the Batman mythos. A widely recognized supporting character for many years in the Batman mythos has always been his young sidekick, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the years, ranging from like the graphic novels to the movies, Robin's persona has changed due to the media's influence. In the graphic novel sense, the first Robin, Dick Grayson, was introduced in 1940, and in 1970 he finally grew up and went to become the hero Nightwing. Second Robin, Jason Todd, appeared in the 80s, and in the stories he was eventually badly beaten and then killed in an explosion set by the Joker, but later was revived as an adversary using the Joker's old persona as the Red Hood. Carrie Kelly is the first female Robin to appear in the Batman stories, and was the final Robin in the continuity of the Frank Miller graphic novels.
Mm.
Yeah, and then the media kind of got their own idea on Robin, and of course, since it's the media, they always, put things in a twisted kind of light. And sources state that there were underlying themes of child molestation or like homoerotic themes, and there was even concerns that younger generations were putting themselves in danger because they wanted to be like Robin, and since he was a young child, they identified more with him than Batman, I suppose. But the creators and directors of Batman tried to resolve these problems by creating the Son of Batman, which was another storyline where Bruce Wayne had a son, Damian Wayne, and as a result, the media, I guess, kind of was a little more flexible since it was his son and it wasn't just some random child. Yeah, it made a little bit more sense. It was it was his son fighting alongside him. I guess it was less provocative for children. So.
Right, and then in terms of child endangerment in the Dark Knight series by Christopher Nolan in the film Dark Knight Rises, Robin is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, an adult in his 20s. This is due to the fact that pressure from the media into making Robin seem more like an adult due to the violence that he was endangered in, as well as his relationship towards Batman.
Yeah, you can definitely see that because he's an older character, so they're more shown as friends rather than him as a child.
But it's interesting that he's never technically Robin within the movies.
Yeah,
they just leave you hanging.
We presume he's going to be something like Robin at the end, but yeah. The media perception that comics were just for kids and the failing comic book industry in the 1980s led to the dramatic decisions that we've learned about in class, such as The Dark Knight Returns and the publishing and creation of graphic novels, which made a marked transition of demographic, going from children to adults in the modern day. Comic book stores, when you go into them now, it's really weird. They have a kids section, which is a very small part of the store, whereas the rest of the store has books that are targeted to adults primarily. You're going to see a lot more adult thematics in comics today. To transition the Batman mythos in order to attract older generations, the movie Batman and Robin came out. The critical reception for the Batman and Robin movie, including George Clooney's "I killed the franchise" comment, led heads at DC to latch onto a drastic change for the Batman character in film media through creating the Dark Knight trilogy. I heard that when Nolan offered them the idea that they immediately leapt onto it. No questions asked. They were like, this is a perfect idea. Right. So by choosing to do that trilogy, they added resilience to the Batman mythos.
And I can attest, I've seen that movie, and it is pretty bad. So.
That's the first movie I've seen about Batman, and
that's really sad. I'm sorry.
I liked it, but looking back on it now, I don't really know why. Might have been because I was little.
Yeah, once you see other forms out there, the Nolan movies, which most people agree are a lot better, than you realize how bad the other ones were.
Right.
Yeah.
Have any of you ever seen the Tim Burton films? Did you like it?
I definitely liked it better than Batman and Robin with the Schumacher films, but I don't know, I just don't think you can top the Christopher Nolan films.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Probably has something to do with like the generation we're raised in, why we like the Christopher
No,
Nolan
yeah,
ones.
definitely. That will make, and it's the first like big Batman release that we were able to really comprehend
Yeah.
within our generation. Like I know I was pretty young, and I figure you were pretty young too when Batman and Robin came out. It was like '99, so I would have been only 6.
Yeah.
So that would not have reached me as much as like the stuff today would have.
Yeah.
But next, we're going to be talking about the forms that we see Batman in. So comics, TV,
which is funny because
cartoons.
we've just been talking about movies and how we've seen all these movies, but the original format for Batman was comics, and that was the primary media that he was represented in. That's where he was created. That's where he was born, like so to say, in the comic world. But at least for all of us, that's not where we first encountered him. And most young adults and kids and teens of our generation would probably agree with that we've seen him first in like movies or TV shows on WB Kids or something like that, and not in the actual comic books.
I remember our professor asked at the beginning of the class, had we ever read comic books before? Had you guys?
No.
Nope.
I'd read comic books, but never Batman comic
Never
books.
Batman, yeah. Why did you never read comics?
I guess I was never really introduced to them as much. Like my parents never really pushed comic books, so I never really got into them as like other people did.
Right. There was none of my friends, like
no one
I knew read comic books, so I didn't either.
You didn't even like look at them in the bookstore? Like you didn't even go over to the section if you ever went?
Not really. I don't know. Maybe I was just too hooked on Harry Potter at the time.
No, yeah, Harry Potter was definitely a thing of our generation. Yeah, I didn't pay attention to comics much until later. So, and I don't even know why I really got drawn to them. But what have you read before?
In terms of comics?
Yeah, just in terms of comics.
Not really superhero comics. I've read the comics and newspapers, if that counts. No. But there's I actually got into the graphic novel series Bone, if any of you guys have read that.
Yeah,
that was really good. But I guess since the superhero world, like the superhero comic world is so big, there's so much to read, I just like never got into it because I didn't know where to start or what to read first. Like Bone is just a small, like one-dimensional series. There's not like all these layers to it or anything. So.
Yeah, transitioning from comics, I think the live action is where we most have seen Batman. Live action in the movies and the TV shows like Gotham or the animated series. Movies like The Dark Knight, for example, make Joker essentially a primary character, which audiences are trying to understand his psyche, just as Batman grapples with him. I know in The Dark Knight and even in Batman's 1989, they do make Joker a main part of the film.
Yeah.
And everyone loves the Joker as a villain too. The films are often characterized by the villains involved. You might argue the best stories are characterized by the main villains with them.
I would almost argue that sometimes his villains, like the Joker, are more iconic than Batman himself. I remember asking one of my cousins, like, what his favorite character was, like, ever, of all time. And he was like, the Joker. Yeah. And I was like, the Joker? Really? Why? And he was like, he's just so interesting. You don't know what he's going to do. You don't know what he's going to think.
Sure.
And it's really impressive that something like the films would make this character that probably would have gone away in a couple of issues of the comic be a really powerful, like, cultural force.
Yeah, I agree. I think even in like more contemporary films, I know that everybody loves Bane because mostly for his voice and how big he is, but yeah, I agree with you.
And it makes characters that wouldn't have like normally paid attention to. Like I don't think Bane actually ever appeared in any other movies before the Nolan trilogy. Has he?
He was in Batman and Robin. He was
really? Okay.
He was Poison Ivy's sidekick, kind of. I mean, he was his own character, but he was kind of went around Poison Ivy.
So was he goofy or what?
He was this very scrawny guy, and then like he pressed a button and like the venom went in, and he just became like super huge, you know. And then I think if I recall correctly, Batman or Robin, you know, breaks off the cable where the venom's in, and he like goes back down to a scrawny little person. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the Schumacher films wouldn't really make you remember him, but definitely I think the Nolan trilogy has made him like a really solid part of the mythos, and it makes it so people want to see these characters again in the comics, and it affects how much they appear in the
Mhm.
comics too, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
they're just making them an icon. Like,
Yeah.
which, especially like with Bane's mask, I mean, just that now can be an icon, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or like the Joker's makeup or something. Just like Batman has the Batman symbol. So when these villains are so like fleshed out and they have all these side stories and and they're so like they have so many dimensions to them too. They're not just flat characters. It really makes them iconic, I guess.
Trying to remember in the third Nolan movie, is that backbreaking scene in it?
Yes.
Okay, that one's really iconic. I
Yes,
remember
that's
everybody
true.
was like, "It has to be in this movie."
I think with the movies, the actors that portray the villains definitely make them more iconic. With Heath Ledger, I think he did a phenomenal job playing Joker.
Mhm.
People love Jack Nicholson's Joker too. I think the actors did a really good job.
Yeah, that Jack Nicholson Joker was definitely one of my favorites.
I'll have to see it at some point. I really wonder, but Heath Ledger is so different from every other Joker I've ever seen.
They're both very different, but I think they both did a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Moving on to the cartoons. So we have cartoon films and cartoon series as well, but in the cartoons, at least in the Bruce Timm era, you get two different characterizations of Batman. Batman in the animated series and Batman Beyond. And movies like Mask of the Phantasm, which I believe is the first DC animated film they ever did. It's more of a detective type character. He's trying to figure out what's going on with the villain he's trying to trail, or Mask of the Phantasm, he's trying to figure out who this masked figure is that is terrorizing all of Gotham. In Justice League, or any show or movie with a group like Justice League War, he tends to be the strategist type of character. So that is what really informed me on the character when I was a kid. I saw him in, I think, Justice League probably first, like really. So I was really surprised when I read things like Dark Knight Returns, and I was like, why is he trying to scare people? He's the strategist. He's a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. He doesn't do that. So
Yeah, just going off of what Coley said, non-literary forms of Batman media are interesting in the fact that it determinedly can change the perception of the character himself and create a distinctive Batman that people claim as their favorites. So there's all different kinds of Batmans.
yeah.
So most people are not going to say of the comics like, oh yeah, I like that Silver Age Batman the best. But they're most likely going to pick their favorite portrayal, such as Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, Adam West, Kevin Conroy. It's only really since Frank Miller created Batman arc stories in the form of graphic novels that people can choose a favorite iteration, as these stories are not often part of the main continuity.
When one of my friends was reading Batman Year One, she was like, where's more? Where's more of the story? And I was like, there isn't any more. Because ever since graphic novels started coming out, they've been able to create these really, like, centered stories where it doesn't seep into the, like, main series. Like, you can go into the comic book store now and get Batman number 18, but he's not going to be the same Batman as in the Batman Year One.
Yeah, it'd be slightly different.
So
Doing something different too.
But I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, yeah, I really like Golden Age Batman, because everybody would write him a different way. There wasn't a continuous way or a continuous chunk of story.
Yeah, exactly. Even when it was going through those different waves of Batman genres, even within those genres, there were still different Batmans, and he was doing different things and portraying different ways, whether it was by different actors in movies or different authors in comic books or cartoons.
And going off that, I think Batman, the whole entire Batman mythos has become so popular in American culture. It's because everyone can reshape Batman. You know, every person that gets their hands on him, you know, Frank Miller, Christopher Nolan, Tim Burton, Joe Schumacher, they, reshape Batman in the way that they want it. It just makes it different for different audiences. And Batman has become so popular and so resilient because he's so relatable. He's a man behind a mask. He doesn't have any superpowers, and everyone can relate to that because they can, one day become like Batman because he's just like you and I. He's also very flawed. He has psychological issues from his parents' death. He's very, not depressed character. He's not depressed. He's just
Got a lot of emotional baggage.
Yeah, definitely.
He can be depressed, but I think he like tries to put all of his effort into his job,
Mhm.
so
Right.
he doesn't ever think about it
Yeah.
really.
Right.
It's just like in contrast, with Superman. I mean, like his whole planet was destroyed. He probably would have a lot more emotional baggage than Batman. I mean, like it was just Batman's parents, like not his entire race and culture.
Yeah.
But yet Superman, like, isn't is a very different character. I guess he deals with it in different ways, and
I think Batman gained a lot of his popularity
Yeah.
through films because
Mhm.
I know we said it earlier that we all encountered Batman first through films.
Mhm.
None of us read the comic book first.
Mhm.
So that's essentially how Batman gets a lot of its popularity.
yeah, just with anything, movies and TV shows. Like if you want to get something big and out there, that's the way to do it because
Yeah.
everyone loves going to the movies or turning on the TV.
And it's less expensive than investing in comics
That's true.
because you have to buy every new issue every month. It's going to start getting really expensive, whereas you can spend time on one story. So,
And also, you can take an afternoon to watch the Nolan trilogy,
Yeah.
but you can't where
Take a
would
lot
you
longer,
start?
yeah.
Batman's been around
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah.
Where would you start in the comic book?
With
No.
Detective number, what was it, like 79 or
39,
something?
yeah.
The very first Batman comic.
talking about popular culture and his endurance in it, I believe that even after being in this class for a while, I'm not really sure what makes people like Batman so much. Of all the superheroes I've read, he's not really my favorite. I can list everything we've said before, and those are all really good reasons, but in every capacity I've liked him in, it's when others can break down his tough exterior. Bruce Wayne is such a tirelessly hardworking character. Like in the Nolan movies, Rachel complains about how he won't ever really stop being the Batman,
Yes.
and that really frustrates her. So he really doesn't. Even we see in The Dark Knight Returns, he, even as an old man, wants to keep going, but he doesn't really get anything in return for his job. He's often so focused on his work that he can forget the people around him. And he has a whole cast of characters around him who really care about him. So whenever Bruce can show a bit of compassion, that's when I like him best. In the recent Death in the Family arc in the current comics, there was a really touching scene between him and Jason Todd that just made me like the character a lot better than I did before. It makes it interesting to see the next time Batman will open up to others a little bit, and what the circumstances are that make the character do so.
Yeah, and just like we were saying earlier, like I think the main attraction towards Batman nowadays is the villains. I know that everybody loves, like you were saying, your little cousin saying that, well, Joker is one of his favorite characters, not even Batman.
Yeah.
I think most people would agree with that because there's definitely a relationship between Batman and the villains that have built over the years that continue the Batman mythos and get a sense of somehow your relationship towards Batman, but also your relationship building with the villains with Batman.
Yeah. Batman is clearly a dynamic character. Throughout many different formats and characterizations, he's able to live on, with the remarkable celebration of his 75th birthday last year. To wrap things up, each member will say their favorite thing about the Batman character. My favorite thing, personally, is Batman's world. It's probably one of my favorite things about him. He just has He just has such a vibrant cast of characters that inform who he is and the kind of decisions he'll make against them, and it makes what could be a really simple character more fun to watch. His rogues gallery is just awesome.
Yeah, that definitely is cool. My favorite thing about Batman is his strategy to get the upper hand on his opponents. Even without his any superpowers, he's still able to protect all the citizens of Gotham.
My favorite thing about Batman is that he's become a more modern style superhero, and
Yeah.
like in the Christopher Nolan films, they have more modern gadgets and stuff. And the last film had an atomic bomb.
Yeah.
It's just gone away from the comic style.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, which is, I guess, one of the reasons why he's able to get the upper hand with all his new technology he
Yeah.
has. I think what I like most about Batman, though, is his dark persona, because a lot of superheroes are lively and some are even comical, like The Flash or Spider-Man or something.
Yeah.
But Batman, he kind of stands alone for the most part as being a darker, more complex type of hero and a more complex character in general. I mean, obviously we know a lot more about Batman from being in this class and studying him a lot. I'm sure all of the superheroes have big backstories, but I just feel like Batman's has the most layers, and it seems to be like one of the more like fleshed out stories, and that's why he kind of has this like dark or even emo, for lack of a better word, kind of character.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool about him. He's just like really unique in that kind of way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Bye.